Good evening, everyone. I am Shujin Triple Kawanishi here in Second Life. Welcome to When I Was Your Age, podcast where I will be discussing stuff from the 80s to let you know what stuff today was like when I was your age. This week, I'm actually going to be talking about something that, for the most part, really doesn't exist anymore. The background sound effect that you've got at the moment is actually what I'm talking about because my little one has suggested this. If you have a recommendation, please send it on over to me, shujintriple@gmail.com, and we'll see what I can cover for you. This week, what I'm talking about is the arcade. Now, some of us, unfortunately, do not live in an area where there is even so much as a game room anymore. And for those of you that are lucky enough to be around where there is one, it's usually pretty small. Traditionally, it had been, for whatever reason or other, over bowling alleys, and that was where I had the most fun for myself, for one. Bowling alley, where I grew up, we had a whole bunch of games in an area that was basically just walled off. And it was a whole bunch of pinball machines, and at first, only a handful of video games. And I can still remember when it changed around oh so much. Among other things, there were vector graphic games, some of the earliest driving games from Atari. And I can still very easily remember there was a air hockey table right in the middle. And sooner or later, some of us who are old enough to remember would have heard one of the pinball machines, the old Bally Midway machines that was starting up. And if you know somebody who's old enough, watch their face, watch their eyes, because they know the sound effect. It was always tick, 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 boom, 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 boom. Always the same. And at the time, we didn't even have electronic scorekeeping. Oh, no. These were little numbered rollers behind the glass. And they counted up in tens, not hundreds, not thousands, tens. So every time you hit something, 10, 10, 10. Oh, look at that. You got 100 points on that one because it was a bonus. Good job. But as it became older and the vector graphic games started to come out, you started to see some of the really interesting stuff. And back in the day, when I was your age, the arcade experience was one where if you were watching somebody who was playing a game and you wanted to play next, you put a quarter up on the glass and you waited your turn. And there was none of this yelling and screaming about, hey, it was my turn, that's my quarter. No. There was a code of honor. If you put quarters up there, it was your quarter. When it was your time, you went. And there was no bitching about it whatsoever. And yes, everything at the time was 1 quarter, 25 cents. And you'd be surprised at the stuff. And the games at the time are classic now, especially the vector games, because they had something going for them that a lot of games today simply don't have, which was they kept going until you lost. Perfect example. Asteroids. Simple concept. You have a little spaceship, and you have the ability to turn, to make it go forward, and in an emergency, to blink out and blink back in again somewhere, who only knows where. It was the worst idea in the world. And then you got to shoot little laser pellets out on the screen. And it was such a simple concept. All you had to do was just shoot the rocks, because they're just floating around. How difficult could it possibly be? You shoot 1, you get 2. You shoot those 2, you get 4. You get rid of those 4, oh, you're lucky. Because every time it got smaller, it got faster. And it moved in a different order. It changed direction. God help you if you had one of those big ones right up in front of you, because then you had to... You learned real fast how to do that with your fingers. But it was fun because it was never a question as to where did the game end. The game ended with you. Now, as time went on, of course, the games changed around, and the graphics changed, and the sounds changed. But those were the ones that I remember the most. Asteroids. Battlezone. I could kick Battlezone's ass for 20 minutes at a clip on 1/4. I was that good. Now, admittedly, not so much. But it was okay. And then you had the sit-down machines. Not just the stand-up ones, the sit-down machines, where you had an entire enclosure around you. Star Wars came out. And all of a sudden, you've got the vector graphics, but you've got colors, real colors on the screen this time. And you've got a storyline to follow along. You're in the X-Wing. You're piloting this thing, and you've got the steering mechanism. And it's up to you to get through all the TIE fighters, to get through around on the top of the Death Star, and to finally go down the trench and shoot that port. And what happens when you beat the Death Star? Did it all over again. And you hoped that you were actually fast enough to get to all the stuff that was trying to kill you first. Because sooner or later it would get too fast. Now that was very different from the way that a lot of games came out afterwards, where you could hold on to a code and get along to a different place in a game further along as you go. But back at the time, when I was your age, the room was filled with a cacophony of sounds of games trying to entice you to come over with their flashing lights and the screen showing up and all the sounds of the game taunting you. I remember I was completely freaked out by one game that was called Bezerk. The idea was that you were this little guy running around in a maze, very simple to get around maze, with all these androids out to kill you, who could shoot at you, and you could shoot them. And they could shoot you side to side, up and down, or on a diagonal. That was a little bit different. But it was the first game where I heard it yelling out at you. Stop the humanoid. Stop the intruder. Intruder alert. And some of us remember that. But then, the one that I remember that was the absolute scariest of them all, the absolute scare pit of your stomach wrench around, came some years later. After the vector graphics were gone, sort of, and the real screens, the sprite graphics were in there. The scariest, absolute scariest thing that I ever heard come out of a video game. Beware, I live. Beware, I live. Sinnistar was damn scary. Hunger, coward. And it was the best thrill that you could get for a quarter as a kid. Safe. You never had to worry about getting a broken bone. You never had to worry about anybody who was telling you, move on. But it was great. And an arcade would have 10, 20, 30 machines at a time. And if you want to see what some of them look like, go back and watch Tron, the original Tron. When they go and they show you Flynn's arcade, granted, it was a little stylized. But that's what it was. It was just machine after machine after machine after money-changing machine after machine. So much sound, so many sound effects, so much music blaring in. And at the time, it was the best way to blow off a whole bunch of money that you didn't have. Because even if you didn't have the money to play, you could stand there and you could watch. And you could ask, how the hell did you do that? You still remember the classics to this day. Pac-Man, the whole series of them. Asteroids, Space Invaders, Kicks, Breakout, Zaxxon, Tron, Discs of Tron, some of the greats, and some of the stuff that came later that was just completely different, like Dragon's Lair and Space Ace. Even those of us who didn't grow up at the time have enjoyed playing them. And these are completely different from home games. And we can talk about that another time. But when I was your age, video game arcades, it was nothing like them. And now, they simply don't exist. At least, not the way that I remember them. In the meantime, thank you for listening and watching. And of course, I sincerely hope that you've enjoyed. If you have enjoyed this, please subscribe to me over here on YouTube. You can find me under the name Shujin Tribble. If you have suggestions for me, what you'd like me to cover, please, by all means, let me know. You can hit me over on, well, Gmail. shujintribble@gmail.com, and I'll be more than happy to cover pretty much any topic. Tell me what it is that you think of today that's common and just average and nothing special, and I'll tell you how different it really is compared to when I was your age. In the meantime, as always, thank you. As my usual parting, I wish you the peace I no longer have. I wish you the strength that I've learned. I wish you well. Good night, everyone.
You know what's true? Before you can say boo, you'll be my age too.